tonight, the last in our annual series of year-end interviews with maritime premiers. CTV anchor Steve Murphy sat down with New Brunswick Premier Blaine Higgs just before the holidays. Here now is that conversation.
Premier Higgs, good of you to have us in your office today. Thank you.
Well, welcome. Pleasure to have you be here.
You've had this job for less than 2 months. You've been in here for less than 2 months, and you are, by your own definition, a newbie.
Yes.
What's the most surprising thing about this job? The one thing you weren't expecting?
I guess what's been the most rewarding aspect coming into this has been the acceptance of the team that's here, the people working here. I came on a mission to fix New Brunswick, and I've been just excited about what I found here, meeting with the deputies, meeting with a number of meetings with people internally, about what they're thinking about as options and what they're doing to help that matter. And it's just like no one asked for their help. And the meetings I've had to date about what our challenges and reviewing that with people, it's like we can make a difference.
That said, you do seem to be pretty clear and pretty definite in your own vision and the way you see things going. I do want to ask you this: how much do you consult with other people beyond the people you found in the office, and who do you consult?
Well, it depends on the topic. I mean, if I was to look at the WorkSafe situation we had here with premiums going right through the roof, so I met with WorkSafe and the officials that work in workers' compensation, and we reviewed the report that was put together last year, and the report was released back in July. And so they had ideas of what we needed to do. There were 20-some recommendations, and basically they said, here's what needs to happen. We need some legislative changes. It was an employer-employee report, and so I said, when can we get this done? And they were talking like next year, next spring sometime, and I said, this is something we got to deal with now, and we brought it forward in the legislature in December, and so. That was consulting with the people that knew what the problem was, had recommendations for a solution, and it's a matter just to react and get on with it.
The office of Premier can be a lonely one. Very few people, relatively few people, ever occupy the office of Premier. So who do you rely on for advice at that level? Do you call other premiers? Have you called McKenna and Sean Graham and Bernard Lord and asked them for advice?
I have. I've talked with. I've met with Frank McKenna. I talked to him previously, but I met with him just this past week or so in Toronto in his office. I've met with all the premiers, the First Minister's meeting. I got a chance to meet with them personally. I had talked with probably 4 or 5 of them prior to meeting them personally. They called on a congratulatory basis, and we got into discussions about what the role is like. But I didn't come into it completely, from not understanding what it would be, because being in finance, I worked relatively closely with the Premier's office, and so I expected much of what I've kind of walked into. I guess what has been most rewarding about it all is being able to make a decision and just get on with it.
You had a long career in business, and you worked for Arthur Irving for many years. Have you asked Mr. Irving for any advice?
No, I haven't. He gave me lots through the years to do me for a lifetime.
He did.
On basically getting results and getting value for money being spent. And I know that that's what I bring to every dime of taxpayer dollars we spend, is if you come in with a request, it better have either a return on that investment, it better have a service delivery model that's going to improve, and you better define very clearly how you're going to determine that.
During our Leaders Roundtable in the run-up to the election, you bristled a little when someone said, Mr. Higgs, running New Brunswick is not like running Irving Oil. Was that a shot, or is that a fair comment?
Well, that was a shot, but it isn't like running Irving Oil. That's true. Because in running a company, it's there for profit. But in running a province, it's there to provide better service. And the similarities are getting value for the money being spent. So for me, it's not a business for profit. It's a business for better service delivery. And so my challenge is to get better value for every tax dollar that's spent.
I want to talk to you about the political reality of being a minority premier. Few people in the history of parliamentary democracy have become First Minister with quite as little support as you have. You've done it, however, and I want to ask you, how much influence does Mr. Austin now have as a practical matter, insofar as you rely on him to remain premier?
Well, I mean, it's, I guess, the old adage that you have to be cognizant of who brings you to the dance, right? And so I'm here because of their support. That's fair. there are a lot of things that our platforms agree on. I mean, there are things that don't, and we chose to focus on what we agree on. So to it's a reality of the situation I'm in, and I've got to say that certainly thus far the communications have been good. They've been open. They've been honest, and that's with all of our party members with in terms of working with the Alliance. And we're hoping to bridge those gaps too, and with other parties, with the Greens and with the Liberals.
Could you ever see a circumstance in which the Progressive Conservative Party and the People's Alliance would merge and become a single party?
Well, it's probably very early days to discuss anything like that, but ultimately, the vote splitting issue, it only serves, I guess, a purpose to see that you never become elected. So it is interesting how we got to this point. I'm hopeful that I think this has provided a real unique time for New Brunswick to address the many issues that for a long time maybe we just didn't find a reason to talk about it, and we need to do that. And I'd like to think at the end of the day we have lots of common ground that allows us to move forward in the best way of the province, but the best way to make sure it works.
There are those, Premier, who, in fairness, are still wary about your own feelings on bilingualism, particularly given your past in the Confederations of Regions Party, which was an anti-bilingualism party. What can you say to allay their concerns? And I wonder specifically if "I'm sorry" might be one of the things you'd say for your previous support of CORE.
Well, that was a different point in time. I mean, I was a unilingual English person. I mean, I am still a unilingual English person, but I was working in English New Brunswick. I hadn't been really exposed to the rest of the province. I traveled a lot around the world, but it was all doing business in English. And I found that the resentment of more or less a new law around official bilingualism was high at that time, and I was in the camp of what's this all about? Why are we doing this? So over the last 30 years, it's been a difference for me, but most notably in the last 8 years, recognizing what we have in our province and what benefits can exist, but we have a situation that has not been corrected for 50 years. At this point in time, we shouldn't even be having a discussion about our province being, our people being fully bilingual. But in fact, our education system in English New Brunswick, graduates less than 10% of the students bilingual, and that's in the French immersion program. So we've failed miserably in terms of being able to graduate people to speak of both languages in a conversational way.
But do you now regret that at one point in your life, granted it was a different time, you were a different man, you were a younger man, but at one point in your life you were anti-bilingualism?
Well, what I was, I wasn't anti-bilingualism. I thought there should be one working language in that. That was the.
But that's effectively anti-bilingual in the bilingual province.
Well, in a one language, working language was seen at the time to be a simplification of the process, and I didn't appreciate the strength of the two cultures in the province, which I now do.
So you were wrong then.
Yeah, I think it was overstated then, and there were reasons in that point in time that I would have a different opinion than I do today.
Observant viewers to our broadcast might wonder why you do not have the flag of Acadia in your office. It does fly in front of the legislature. It's not in your office.
I have the flag of New Brunswick and the Canadian flag, and the flag of New Brunswick represents the entire province. And I feel it's important that we have a national and a provincial unity. I mean, it could be here, and that wouldn't be a problem, but it...
Was it not here when you came in?
Well, the flag was here. In fact, I don't know exactly when it left here, but it had been in this office before, I think. Yeah.
Should it be here now?
Well, it could be. It wouldn't be anything that I would be particularly taken out, so it could be. But I do think it's important that we recognize that as a province, we are one. And so whether the flag's here or not is irrelevant, but I think it's important we recognize it as we are a province.
Will you bring it back in?
I could. I may, yeah. Would you like to have it here now? Maybe. I don't know where it is.
I've just noted that it was here before.
I don't know where it is, but...
I've just noted that it was here before. One thing that is here, and it's behind your desk...
I didn't have it removed, if that's what you're asking.
Well, I appreciate that clarification. There's a sign behind your desk that says "Province First, Politics Second."
That's right.
Where did that come from?
That came from my first leadership challenge, when I ran for leader. It was a mantra that I promoted right from the beginning, because I saw that political decisions were being made at the expense of the province, and it should be the other way around. Provincial decisions that benefit the province should be made regardless of the political situation. And I know there's a balance, but the balance was too far one way.
What decision have you had to make, even as Premier, in which you had to do that, put province before politics?
Well, I think that in the relation to the current situation with Amherst, New Brunswick, and us putting ambulances on the road. I mean, the decision that was made and now being challenged is in the judicial review, we said, you know, we got to look after the health of the citizens in the province. And as a result, we want to have ambulances on the road. And that was a situation in both French and English New Brunswick. So politically, it would have been easy just to, you know, not do anything. But to have people actually lives at risk and have situations like in Saint-Quentin where that actually happened, that had to be a decision made to do what's right for the health of
That, however, might be seen as a decision that also serves your political interest.
Well, I don't know. In the sense of the controversy that it creates when you tie anything to do with language, you know, it can be, and I've felt it just this last few days in that regard.
You've already started to pull back on government spending, something you said you were going to do, and you've done it very early on in your term as Premier. But of course, as you know, health, education, welfare, debt servicing account for, I think it's about 80% of every dollar you would know, probably to the penny, because you're an accountant, a businessman, and you're also a former finance minister. But how much will you necessarily have to cut in health and education, particularly, and perhaps in social services, since you can't cut debt servicing, at least not yet?
You know, it's interesting. We're going to be able to balance the budget. We said we wouldn't. We're not going to need to raise personal taxes to do that on the people of the province. We know that we're spending at 3 times the rate of inflation, and we're the results for that. So currently the province is spending about $2,000 more per working family than it was 4 years ago. So I'm asking every department to basically say, I know where you were 4 years ago, I know where you are now, so you tell me, how did you get 3 times the rate of inflation over this last 4 years, and what have you accomplished because of it? So if you can show me in measurable terms what is improved because of that spending, then we're good. But if you can't, then we need to find a way that we dial it back. And so I'm just looking at what's been achieved, and I'm pretty comfortable that, with the tax increases that have gone on in this province, there's plenty of money in the system to manage and maintain our services.
Will you need to cut health and education spending?
Not need to change or lower services. Will I be able to find ways to reduce spending and still deliver the service? I'm very optimistic.
The numbers will be smaller.
The number might be smaller, but the service levels won't be less.
So you'll spend less and get better delivery for
We'll do more.
your money.
That's correct.
I said you were an accountant. I believe you're an engineer.
I'm an engineer. Yeah.
You may be an accountant too. You're pretty sharp pencil.
Well, I did. I'm an engineer by profession. I spent a lot of years in operational management.
Absolutely. Before we go, I had somebody say to me as recently as today, we don't know an awful lot about Blaine Higgs. You've only had the job for a couple of months. So let me ask you this. What is something about you that we don't know that we should know? An interest or a hobby or a skill. Something about the Premier that nobody knows, or very few people know.
Well, it's interesting that, I have a life outside of politics. This was not a bucket list item for me. I never planned to do this. I had hoped to be another 4 years in finance, and that was it. So I'm a family man first and foremost. I have my lovely wife and I have been married for going on 41 years. We have 4 daughters, 4 grandchildren. Most recently, one a grandchild in the last couple of weeks.
Congratulations!
And so that's exciting. Christmas baby, and that daughter lives here in New Brunswick, and so very handy to where we live in this bit. I recreationally I ski, I snowmobile, I have a motorcycle. I do a lot of activities, traveled on the bike extensively, my wife and I, and snowmobile in the wintertime. I've been all around the province on the trails, and that's a lot that people miss in the province. I fish. I was a guide when I was a kid. I guided fishermen coming from the U.S. into New Brunswick, and it's so. And I planned when I retired. I was going to retire in 2010. I planned to work on a woodlot, cutting wood. I love physical work. I got an old dump truck, and I was going to deliver wood to neighbors. And that was going to be how I was going to keep in shape.
And here you are driving this dump truck. Yeah.
My truck doesn't move, no.
This will air on December 31st. Your mother will be 98 years old. We wish her a happy birthday.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
It's good of you to have a few minutes for us.
It was nice to be here. All the best of the season. Merry Christmas to you and your family.
And an update to our interview. The Acadian flag mentioned in Steve's interview was, according to the Premier's staff, removed from the office and placed in the lobby while a choir performed. It wasn't returned, an oversight according to the staff. Well, after our interview and Steve pointing it out, it's now back in the Premier's office. CTV News at 6 will be back right after this.